And I am back, as we promised, with Donny to talk about the upcoming two lunar eclipses in 2021. So we already covered the solar eclipses, which are usually slightly bit more important than the lunar eclipses, because the lunar eclipses tend to be playing out more internally than on a physical level. And these two lunar eclipses actually are going to be extremely visible in India, East Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Ocean and America as well. So usually where the lunar eclipses are visible, that's when they tend to be a lot more prominent. How are you doing, Donny?
I'm good. We'll have our first lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus
That's
at the end
right.
of 2021, but we'll get to that later. Predominantly, we are still talking about eclipses in the Gemini-Sag axis as well,
Yeah.
and a lot of third and ninth house energies. It just got me thinking the other day that whether um, university entrances not only require quarantine papers like what we discussed earlier, but then certain nationalities or students might be actually barred from studying overseas as well.
Yeah, we've got the South Node in the ninth house. So some of the ninth house themes need to be let go of, right? And that's, for instance, something to do with, again, education system, something to do with the universities. Ninth house in mundane astrology. So once again, the mundane means that we're talking about worldly events. It talks about foreign lands, high seas, religious affairs, the church, justice, lawyers, higher education. So there is a possibility here where people need to be able to study in their own countries. Yeah, there might be
Yeah.
some type of restrictions happening in the department. Yeah,
Okay, let's talk about this eclipse, how we actually will get to this lunar eclipse because um this lunar eclipse actually started off with a new moon way back on 26th of December 2019. Uh slightly before the pandemic.
yeah,
And then we move into like a so-called progressed, like quarter moon phase where the sun squares the moon on 25th of August 2020. And then 9 months later, we get this lunar eclipse in the whole scheme of the picture. So you may want to track, maybe if you want, like look back at where the new moon that happened in late November 2019, whether something has been playing out in your life and how this lunar eclipse that's going to happen in late May of 2021, something will culminate eventually because it's an eclipse altogether.
yeah. So each of the eclipses have got a culmination point sometime approximately about 18 months later. So this is going to be a culmination point of something which might have started approximately 2 years ago. And yes, as Donny says, it's worth having a look at whether you started something new about 18 months ago, because then this is going to be the time of harvest. Because we're talking about a empowered full moon. And we do need to know about full moons that typically, if we made the adjustments in our life and we lowered our expectations, then usually this is a good time. But if we didn't make any adjustments to our lives in the last 18 months, usually it can be a cosmic force. So I give you an example. When we talk about lunar phases, we can really talk about relationship methods, because the sun represents the gentleman and the moon is going to be representing the wife. So the one phase before the full moon phase, usually about making the necessary adjustments and changing our kind of expectation towards the partner. So for instance, with a new moon, you might get to know someone new in your life. with the next moon phase, you take your relationship to the next stage. So you might move together. Then you guys having the first struggles there because obviously you get to know your partner really when you live together. And then after, maybe you want to take your relationship further and you want to get married, but the partner might say that I'm not ready yet. Because the full moon talks about basically my needs versus other people's needs. This is an opposition here. So the full moon usually talks about the fact that if we made the necessary adjustments, we lowered our expectation, we kind of compare our needs with the partner's needs, then it is a brilliant time. If we haven't done that, so usually it is quite challenging. So this time around, we are going to be having this full moon on steroids in the 3rd and the 9th house, which is something to do with the local travels versus international travels. We can talk about the primary school studies versus the higher education and so forth. So whatever has been happening since 2019 towards the end of the year, it just indicates for us that something needs to be implemented. And if the government hasn't acted on it, because of course we're talking about justice here as well, if there was no justice made, this could be quite a challenging time in the next 9 months after 2021, May 26. However, if the necessary steps are being made, then usually a full moon period can indicate a great energy around us. Do you agree with me?
Yeah. Also, I think as we mentioned in the last video, Venus is out of bound in all eclipses in 2021. And likewise for here as well. And Mercury is also out of bound. So there's some, and since like Mercury and Venus are both in the 3rd house of television, like what's on the telly and media and all that, there can be a lot of mistrust, particularly because Mercury out of bound in Gemini, late Gemini, is squaring Neptune. So fake news, more fake news, more smoke and mirror news that kind of like divert our attention and, you know, being kept in a bubble of a delusion of sorts. Venus is also square Neptune. So yeah, it's a mixed bag with this particular lunar eclipse. I've also checked out the fixed stars. The important fixed stars that's highlighted in this lunar eclipse, and particularly Mercury out of bound, is parallel to fixed star Alcone, which is a Palladian fixed star. And this one can actually mean potentially many disappointments, loss of possessions, much loss from legal affairs, business failure, and trouble through children.
I
There's
believe
also
that maybe this loss, what you're kind of talking about, is actually going to be talking about some extreme weather conditions. And the reason why I would say that is because the 4th house in mundane astrology talks about the country's weather conditions. And we've got there quite a distressed Mars.
Yeah.
Now, Mars is the aggression, the violence, the planet of war, engineering, armies, and so forth. So this could actually really indicate, because it's a water sign, so it's Cancer, it could indicate heavy rains or something to do with the tide or some type of extreme weather conditions.
Also, when we talk about that Mercury out of bound that's parallel to fixed star Alcone, perhaps we are also struggling with the darker side of human nature as well. But I feel that this is kind of counteracted with the solar eclipse that we discussed in the last video. It's about sudden flashes of ideas that seem to have a psychic or unconscious flavor to them. Hunches, visions, prophetic dreams are the essence. A truly creative series of solar eclipses, which should leave the individual enriched. The ideas and hunches which come from this family of eclipses can be acted upon. Mars here is actually ruled by the moon, and since is part of the equation of a lunar eclipse, so I also looked at what fixed star the Mars actually sits on, and it's actually conjunct the fixed star Castor, which is one of the twins.
Mm-hmm.
And this one talks about a potential aimless life, and there's many ups and downs as well associated with that.
You know what I also can see here is that, of course, we're talking about a lunar eclipse, but the lunar eclipse is being squared by Jupiter, right? Which is the ruler of Sagittarius, as well as, of course, Pisces. So therefore, when I was talking about at the beginning about the good part of the full moon, I mean, the ruler itself is actually squaring both of them, which could indicate, unfortunately, that there is still going to be some type of conflicts when it comes to the people's needs versus the governmental needs, right? Because Sun is representing here the government, and the moon is going to be representing the people. And again, something in regards to justice being served, something in regards to wanting to actually travel, for instance, with this third and ninth house. And that Jupiter seems to be not necessarily allowing it. Or even if it allows it, I would say it is allowing it partially. Because Jupiter is extremely strong in this chart. Of course, we're talking about a domicile position, so basically a rulership. Now, apart from Jupiter being in the 12th house, which we can also see that Jupiter has just recently changed signs. So it is again an indication, and Jupiter is not going to be there for that too long, because after a while it's going to go retrograde and it's going to go back into Aquarius anyway, which probably we're going to be talking about in a separate video. But when a planet ingresses into a new sign, it talks about new opportunities, new ways of dealing with matters. So this Jupiter can indicate here that there is going to be a period of time when, for instance, the travel restrictions are going to be eased up. And there is going to be a time when unfortunately, it might go back to the old ways, let's call them now old ways. So with some type of restriction. Of course, it's restriction because we're talking about square. Now, because the Jupiter is placed in Pisces as well as in the 12th house, in mundane astrology, 12th house is going to be talking about something which is hidden. And the sun always wants to bring light onto certain matters. So I feel like it could also indicate that some governmental secrets are going to be coming into the limelight. And as Donny said, there might be possibilities of plenty of fake news and plenty of truth as well behind, and it is going to be extremely confusing. I'm guessing no one is surprised here because that's what media is all about anyway. On top of that, the 12th house does talk about something to do with darkness, something to do with hospitals, prisons. So this could again indicate something to do with the healthcare eventually might be coming up, for instance, with a possible vaccine. And I would be saying that the most probably that's going to be happening either 6 weeks before the eclipse or somewhere after the eclipse. So within that 2-month period, between April to June, it looks like they're going to be coming up with a vaccine. It is still a square to the human nature, which is the moon. So I feel like plenty of people will be reluctant to take it, though.
Also, since we're talking about that Jupiter and Neptune in its own sign in the 12th house, 12th house is also about subversive ideologies of the established order and the sponsors of that subversion. So this can mean like secret or underground societies or parties that's involved. So it could be meddling through the news that we hear and see on our telly and radio and everything. Neptune squaring that Mercury and Venus in the third house. That's going to throw us off. But then I think that because this particular lunar eclipse will be followed 2 weeks later by a very creative and prophetic and hunch-filled solar eclipse, I think we can overcome this. But it's almost like there's this kind of like fighting against the fog kind of feeling.
Absolutely.
Because of that Mars conjunct fixed star Castor opposing Pluto, fourth and 10th house, government and the people. So people may be feeling very emotionally charged up because of that Mars. But that's in the background of that Venus out of bound, that's conjunct fixed star Capella, which can refer to values of society are being challenged, and people are striving to be free of the restrictions that society impose on them. There could also be prominent people coming into place that stand for that goes outside of society's accepted boundaries, that show us that what is possible for the future. Full moon square Jupiter in Pisces, and to bring that utopia Pisces in and to ground it into a sustainable vision. There's something around that thing. Like, it's like, don't get me wrong, it's still gonna be pretty on the messy side. And Venus is also conjunct fixed star Bellatrix. So Venus is out of bound all throughout in the 2021 eclipses, so that can stand for divorce rate going up.
Extreme financial situations.
Because of financial constraints and all that, and you just don't see relationships pre-pandemic and while in a pandemic, you see relationships differently. There can be a lot of like unrestrained feelings that comes forth with Venus out of bound conjunct Bellatrix as well. And people may find themselves more open to engaging in alternative fields like light workers in order to gain some kind of answers or closure.
And when Venus conjunct, and on top of that, it could indicate also some unexpected ways of spending our money. So we might be going overboard, or we really tie the belts.
Yes, and not forgetting that the North Node is conjunct the fixed star Aldebaran, in which it reinforces that it's a time for strong leadership to step forth.
That's right. I wouldn't be shocked if some women power kind of would take over.
Yeah, when Venus is out of bound, actually, like, part of what I've gathered here is that there can be some kind of female politicians or figure that may be rising up into prominence, and this one will be more of on the grand political stage. I think some powerful speeches will be made, and it will just shift our belief systems, that third and ninth house energy.
Great. So let's see how the lunar eclipse energies are playing out in November 2021, which is going to be falling onto the 19th.
This one is like our first lunar eclipse that's on the Taurus Scorpio axis.
Yeah.
And Moon is actually very close to the fixed star Algol, which is the Medusa head.
Yeah.
So someone may be losing their head, literally or metaphorically. It's a partial lunar eclipse, so it won't be as strong as the total one. This is actually a continuation of a series of lunations that started all the way in late May of this year. I think it's May 22nd of 2020. That's where the new moon has seeded then. And 9 months later, it will be like a quarter moon phase, which is 19th of February of 2021. Then 9 months later, it created this partial lunar eclipse. So for people who are interested in this particular eclipse, and maybe something important has happened to them around mid-November of 2021, go back to late May of 2020 and see if something has started. Because this is like the culmination point of what happened in May of 2020.
For me, this is talking about the bank loans. This is talking about whether people are being able to pay their debts back to the banks. And I feel like plenty of people will struggle because of certain amount of debts. On top of that, we're talking about a second and an eighth house axis, which we said it's all about money, especially the eighth house, which is not ours. So I feel like some of the government are also going to be having issues with money. But on top of that, you know, as you mentioned, this Algol thing, and I'm going to make a video about separately about the elections as well. But this could really indicate to me that there could be some type of terror attack against the head of a state, which is the sun. So the sun represents basically the ruler of a country here. And that moon, which is conjunct in Algol, and as Donny said, Algol is all about an unfortunate period of time. There is going to be a very powerful, most probably a woman as well, who might pass away. Of course, we're talking about here a moon, which is always a hierarchy figure as well, apart from just the common people. And this could really, really indicate that there is going to be a nation which is going to suffer because of a huge loss. And it's going to be affecting the world, at least a big part of the world.
I think because like when the new moon equivalent of this lunar eclipse happened, it actually was conjunct the fixed star Alcone, which is a Palladian fixed star, also an unfortunate one.
Yeah. Here we can also see, again, Jupiter is playing a big role. Jupiter is still squaring the sun, squaring the moon, squaring Algol all together. And even when I look at that Pluto and Venus, which we said again, it's going to be out of bound, this is bringing some political uncertainty in some countries. Yeah. I know we've got plenty of countries. This is going to be a bigger country where the leadership is important on a worldly scale. Yeah. Do you have anything else to mention about this lunar eclipse?
Yeah, the moon is conjunct Algol. Like in summary, it will be about violent death or extreme sickness. Perhaps someone prominent will be plagued with personal tragedies, be it one's own or one's people in the country, even. But it also talks about trying to stand for something with a very strong social conscience. It may also come up with that. But overall, it's an unfortunate fixed star, so it's a time for melancholy, sadness or loss of some sorts. Having said that, moon is actually parallel to the fixed star Arcturus, which can bring about like a healing quality with it. Like perhaps wanting to help people gain better lifestyles. And it's also a time of concern for those in need, the less fortunate, the the one that's forgotten or the dispossessed parts of society. Venus is also parallel to Antares, the fixed star. So we might feel that we need to make rash judgments over this lunar eclipse. And we may also find it difficult to socialize. Only Venus is out of bounds. So this can represent like we may still be unable to socialize as per pre-pandemic. And also, I think with this Taurus Scorpio axis in the second and eighth house, ramifications of the stimulus packages that's been given to us in 2020, the full extent of the impact on the economy will be unfolded on this lunar eclipse around this period. Not forgetting that Venus is actually going to be in shadow and is preparing to go retrograde, and it's going to station to go retrograde at 26 or 27 degrees of Capricorn. So it'll conjunct Pluto 3 times.
That's
which
right.
means that we are accessing all the governmental money, Venus, that came to us, that kind of, what do we do now moving forward now that the economy is in shits? You know, are there going to be more rash decisions because of that Venus position for the government 10th house to pump more money, Pluto, massive amounts of money into the economy to save us? Or are we just kind of deal with it ourselves?
I think with Pluto, some sextile towards the sun, as well as a trine towards the moon, I feel like they are going to be coming back with a plan, which would, in the following 18 months, it would work out quite greatly.
Also, Venus also stands for women's rights.
Yeah.
So it's at the 10th house of government. So I wonder if there's like some prominent female figure that's going to enter the Congress, or the government to really like serve as the equalizer. And it's in the sign of Capricorn, so she's got to be really tough to stand up to the boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also divine feminine as well. Yeah.
I think we pretty much covered what the two lunar eclipses might be bringing us. Overall, I would say that this is going to be an easier year for us. There's not going to be extremely too much happening on the sky, apart from these very powerful eclipses. But we are going to be coming back with a general overview of each of the major planetary alignments for you, so that you can pick a picture, put a picture together in regards to 2021. Thank you very much, Donny. It was a pleasure as always.
Can I actually add one more thing? I find it very interesting that Venus parallel to fixed star Antares can also mean that a period when the society is divided and there's extreme polarization. So it's going to be an interesting year. People are going to have very conflicting views since we have eclipses in Gemini Sag axis, but then there's an underlying like birthing of the divine feminine coming forth. And we may be like moving towards that in the coming few years. And this is like a transition period.
That's right. Getting ready for a new phase of our lives, which is, of course, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction on Aquarius is going to be marvelous as well.
Yes. It's the equalizer Aquarius.
Good. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us today. Don't forget to press like, give us some love, thumbs up, and subscribe. And we will be back shortly with a new video. Thank you, Donny. Take care of yourself.
Right. Bye.
Bye-bye.